The October rain hammered against the windows of Jason Miller's suburban home when the doorbell rang at 11:45 that night. Jason had been nursing his third beer, unable to sleep despite the exhaustion that weighted his bones. His wife Rebecca had gone to bed hours ago, and the house felt hollow in that particular way it only did during restless nights. The doorbell's chime cut through the monotonous drumming of rain, making him flinch. Nobody visited this late, not in their quiet neighborhood of Millbrook Heights, not without calling first. Jason set his beer down on the coffee table and moved toward the front door, his heart already beginning to quicken with an inexplicable sense of unease. Through the peephole, he saw a figure standing on his porch, drenched and swaying slightly. The porch light illuminated a face Jason recognized immediately, despite the 3 years that had passed. Marcus Thompson. His best friend since college. The same Marcus who had vanished without a trace during a hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains, the same Marcus whose memorial service Jason had attended with tears streaming down his face, the same Marcus who had been declared legally dead 18 months ago. Yet there he stood, somehow real and solid, his clothes hanging off a frame that seemed too thin, his skin pale in the weak light. Jason's hand trembled as he unlocked the deadbolt. The door swung open, and the smell hit him first. It wasn't the clean scent of rain or the earthy smell of wet clothes. It was something else, something organic and wrong, like meat left too long in a broken refrigerator. Marcus stood there, his eyes fixed on Jason with an intensity that made Jason's stomach clench. Those eyes were wrong too, somehow. The warm brown that Jason remembered had been replaced with something cloudy and distant, like dirty ice. Marcus's mouth opened, and for a long moment, nothing came out but a wet, rasping sound. Then, finally, words. Jason. I came home. The voice was Marcus's, but it sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well, hollow and echoing. Jason felt his body move on autopilot, pulling Marcus into the house despite every instinct screaming at him to slam the door. Marcus stumbled across the threshold, his movements jerky and uncoordinated, like a puppet with tangled strings. Water dripped from his clothes onto the hardwood floor, but Jason noticed it wasn't clear. It had a pinkish tinge, diluted but unmistakable. Marcus, my God, where have you been? Everyone thought you were dead. We need to call someone. The police, your parents, everyone. Jason reached for his phone, but Marcus's hand shot out with surprising speed, gripping Jason's wrist. The fingers were cold, far colder than they should have been even considering the rain. They felt less like human flesh and more like refrigerated clay. No, Marcus said, and there was something almost desperate in that hollow voice. Not yet. Please. I needed to see you first. To come home. His grip loosened, and Jason pulled his arm back, rubbing his wrist where Marcus had held it. The skin felt wrong where Marcus had touched him, tingling and numb simultaneously. Jason studied his friend more carefully now, his initial shock beginning to give way to genuine fear. Marcus's skin wasn't just pale. It had a grayish undertone, and there were patches that looked mottled and bruised. His clothes, what remained of them, were shredded and stained with substances Jason didn't want to identify. Most disturbing were the wounds. Jason could see them now, deep gashes on Marcus's arms and neck that should have been bleeding but weren't, wounds that looked old and infected but somehow closed. Marcus, you need a hospital, Jason said, keeping his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. You're hurt. You look sick. Please, let me help you. Marcus shook his head slowly, water droplets flying from his matted hair. Can't go there. They won't understand. You have to help me, Jason. You're the only one who can. He took a step closer, and Jason instinctively took a step back. The smell was getting stronger, and underneath it, Jason detected something else. Decay. The unmistakable scent of rotting flesh. Marcus's mouth twisted into what might have been meant as a smile, but it looked wrong, too wide, revealing teeth that seemed longer and sharper than Jason remembered. "I'm so hungry, Jason," Marcus whispered, and in that moment, Jason saw something flicker in those cloudy eyes. Something predatory. Something that was definitely no longer human. Jason's survival instincts kicked in before his conscious mind could fully process what was happening. He stumbled backward into the living room, putting the coffee table between himself and Marcus, his heart hammering so violently he could hear the blood rushing in his ears. Marcus didn't immediately follow. Instead, he stood in the entryway, his head tilting to one side in a manner that was distinctly inhuman, like a dog hearing a distant whistle. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across Marcus's face, and Jason could see now what he had missed in his initial shock. The skin on the left side of Marcus's neck was torn, revealing something dark and motionless underneath. No pulse. No movement. Just stillness where life should have been flowing. "Marcus, listen to me," Jason said, forcing his voice to remain calm even as his hands shook. "I want to help you, buddy, but you need to tell me what happened. Where have you been for 3 years?" Marcus's cloudy eyes focused on Jason with effort, and for a moment, something that looked almost like recognition flickered across his face. Something that might have been the real Marcus, trapped somewhere inside whatever this thing had become. "The cave," Marcus said slowly, each word seeming to require immense concentration. "We found a cave. Deep in the mountains. There were others there. They were hungry. So hungry. They bit me. Changed me." His hand moved to his neck, fingers tracing the ragged wound there. "I died, Jason. I remember dying. The cold. The darkness. But then I woke up. And I was so hungry." A floorboard creaked upstairs, and Jason's blood ran cold. Rebecca. She would be waking up, wondering about the voices downstairs. The last thing he needed was for her to walk into this situation without warning. "Stay here," Jason commanded, holding up a hand toward Marcus. "Don't move. I'm going to check on my wife, and then we'll figure this out together, okay?" Marcus's head snapped up at the word wife, and his nostrils flared as if catching a scent. "More," he whispered, and there was a hunger in that single word that made Jason's skin crawl. "No," Jason said firmly, positioning himself between Marcus and the staircase. "Rebecca is off limits. You understand me, Marcus? If you're still in there, if any part of you is still my friend, you won't go near her." The thing that wore Marcus's face seemed to struggle with itself, its body tensing and relaxing in waves, muscles spasming beneath that grayish skin. Jason could see the war happening behind those dead eyes, something human fighting against something monstrous. Finally, Marcus nodded, a jerky, mechanical movement, and backed away toward the far wall. Jason didn't waste time. He bolted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, and burst into the bedroom. Rebecca was sitting up in bed, her blonde hair disheveled, her green eyes confused and heavy with sleep. "Jason? What's going on?" "I heard voices." She reached for the lamp on the nightstand, but Jason grabbed her hand, stopping her. "Rebecca, listen to me very carefully," Jason said, sitting on the edge of the bed and gripping both her shoulders. "Marcus is downstairs." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Marcus Thompson? Your friend who died?" "Jason, that's not possible. You're not making sense." Jason shook his head urgently. "I know how it sounds, but he's here. He showed up at the door. But Beck, something is very wrong with him. He's sick, or infected, or I don't even know what. He doesn't look right. He doesn't act right. I think he might be dangerous." Rebecca pulled back, studying Jason's face in the darkness. She had known him for 8 years, married to him for 5, and she could read the genuine terror in his expression. "Are you serious right now? Should we call the police?" Before Jason could answer, they both heard it. A sound from downstairs. Not footsteps exactly, but a dragging, shuffling noise, accompanied by something else. A low, guttural moan that didn't sound like it came from any living throat. Rebecca's face went pale. What was that? Jason stood up, moving to the bedroom door and closing it as quietly as possible. He turned the lock, knowing even as he did so that it wouldn't stop much if Marcus decided to come up. He said he's hungry, Jason whispered, pressing his ear against the door. He keeps saying he's hungry, and the way he looks at me, Beck. It's like he's looking at food, not a friend. Another moan echoed from below, louder this time, followed by the sound of something heavy falling over. The lamp in the living room, Jason guessed, or maybe the bookshelf. Then came Marcus's voice, but it was different now, less controlled, more animal. Jason. Jason, I can't. I can't hold it back. You need to run. Please. Run. The warning in Marcus's voice was the most terrifying thing Jason had heard all night, because it meant that whatever humanity remained in his friend was losing the battle. Jason spun around, scanning the bedroom for anything that could be used as a weapon. His eyes landed on the aluminum baseball bat in the corner, a relic from his weekend softball league that he hadn't touched in months. He grabbed it, the metal cold and solid in his trembling hands, while Rebecca scrambled out of bed, her phone already in her hand. I'm calling 911, she said, but Jason caught her wrist before she could dial. And tell them what? That my dead friend came back as a zombie? They'll think it's a prank or that we're insane. By the time they take us seriously and send someone, it might be too late. Rebecca's eyes flashed with anger and fear. Then what do you suggest, Jason? We can't just hide up here and hope he goes away. A tremendous crash from downstairs punctuated her words, followed by the sound of splintering wood. Marcus was tearing the house apart. Jason could hear him moving through the rooms below, knocking over furniture, his moans growing more frequent and desperate. Then the footsteps, heavy and dragging, began ascending the stairs. Each step creaked under Marcus's weight, a slow, inevitable approach that made Jason's mouth go dry. Rebecca backed toward the window, pulling aside the curtain to look at the drop to the lawn below. It's too high, she whispered. We'd break our legs jumping from here. Jason positioned himself in front of the bedroom door, bat raised, his mind racing through impossible options. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and stopped. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the continued drumming of rain against the roof. Then Marcus spoke, his voice a tortured rasp that barely sounded human anymore. I can smell you. Both of you. It's driving me crazy. The hunger is like fire, Jason. Like burning alive from the inside. Jason's heart clenched at the agony in those words. This was his best friend, the guy who had been the best man at his wedding, who had helped him move into this house, who had stayed up with him all night when Jason's father died. Somewhere inside that decaying shell was Marcus Thompson, and he was suffering. Marcus, fight it, Jason called through the door. You told me to run, which means you're still in control. You can beat this thing. A sound came from the other side of the door that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Can't fight forever. Already tried. 3 years, Jason. 3 years of wandering, trying to stay away from people. Eating animals. Rats. Anything to stop the hunger for human flesh. But it doesn't help. It only gets worse. I came here because I thought maybe you could help me. Or maybe I just wanted to see a friend one last time before I completely lose myself. Rebecca moved closer to Jason, her hand gripping his arm. There has to be something we can do, she said, loudly enough for Marcus to hear. Some way to cure you, to fix whatever happened in that cave. The door shuddered as Marcus leaned against it, his weight making the frame creak. No cure. The others in the cave, they were like me. Some of them had been there for decades. One of them could still talk, still remember who he was. He told me there's no going back. Once you're bitten, once you die and wake up again, you're not really alive anymore. Just a dead thing that moves and hungers and slowly loses everything that made it human. Jason felt tears burning his eyes. Then why come here, Marcus? Why put us in danger if you knew what you were becoming? The door handle began to turn slowly, testing the lock. Because I'm selfish, Marcus said, and now his voice was changing again, becoming more guttural, more animalistic. Because even though I don't want to hurt you, the hunger is stronger than friendship. Stronger than memory. Stronger than everything. I'm sorry, Jason. I'm so sorry. But I can't stop it anymore. The door suddenly exploded inward, the lock tearing free from the frame with a shriek of splitting wood. Marcus stood in the doorway, and whatever had been holding him back was gone now. His eyes were completely white, rolled back in his head, and his mouth hung open, revealing teeth that were definitely longer and sharper than before. Dark fluid dripped from his mouth, and his hands were extended toward them like claws. The friend Jason had known was gone, replaced entirely by the monster, and that monster was lunging forward with impossible speed, an inhuman screech tearing from its throat as it launched itself at Jason and Rebecca. Jason swung the bat with every ounce of strength he possessed, connecting with Marcus's shoulder just as the creature lunged. The impact sent Marcus spinning sideways into the dresser, but he recovered with horrifying speed, far faster than any living human could manage. Rebecca screamed and threw the lamp from the nightstand, the porcelain base shattering against Marcus's head, but he barely seemed to notice. Jason swung again, this time aiming for the legs, and heard a sickening crack as the bat connected with Marcus's knee. The joint bent backward at an unnatural angle, but Marcus didn't fall. He didn't even slow down. He simply adjusted his stance and came forward again, dragging the ruined leg behind him, his white eyes fixed on them with mindless hunger. Jason realized with dawning horror that pain meant nothing to something that was already dead. The window! Jason shouted, and Rebecca didn't hesitate. She grabbed the wooden chair from the corner and hurled it through the bedroom window with surprising force. Glass exploded outward into the rain, and the sound of shattering seemed to momentarily distract Marcus. He turned his head toward the noise, giving Jason the opening he needed. He charged forward, using the bat like a battering ram, and drove it into Marcus's chest, pushing him backward out of the bedroom and toward the stairs. Marcus's hands clawed at the bat, at Jason's arms, his fingers leaving cold trails across Jason's skin. For one terrible moment, they stood locked together at the top of the stairs, and Jason could smell the decay rolling off his former friend in waves. Then Jason twisted the bat violently to the side and pulled back. Marcus, off balance, tumbled backward down the stairs, his body making horrible thumping sounds as it bounced off each step before landing in a twisted heap at the bottom. Jason didn't wait to see if Marcus would get back up. He already knew he would. He ran back to the bedroom where Rebecca was using a blanket to clear the remaining glass shards from the window frame. "We have to jump," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror in her eyes. "It's this or let that thing eat us." Jason looked down at the lawn below, measuring the distance. 15 feet, maybe 20. Enough to break bones if they landed wrong, but Rebecca was right. They had no choice. The sound of movement from the stairwell told them Marcus was already recovering. Jason helped Rebecca onto the windowsill, holding her hands as she turned around to hang from the ledge, reducing the drop distance. "Let go," he urged. "Bend your knees when you land and roll." Rebecca dropped, and Jason's heart stopped until he heard her voice from below, strained but alive. "I'm okay. Twisted my ankle but I'm okay. Come on." Jason was halfway through the window when Marcus appeared in the bedroom doorway. The fall down the stairs had done significant damage. Marcus's head was tilted at a wrong angle, his neck clearly broken, and one arm hung uselessly at his side. But he was still moving, still coming, and that terrible hunger still burned in those dead white eyes. Jason didn't think. He just let go, dropping into the darkness and the rain. He hit the wet grass hard, his ankle screaming in protest, but he forced himself to roll as he'd told Rebecca to do. When he looked up, Marcus was already climbing through the window, as heedless of the drop as he was of his injuries. "Run!" Jason grabbed Rebecca's arm and they sprinted across the lawn toward the street, the rain soaking them instantly. Behind them, Marcus hit the ground with a wet thud but was on his feet again within seconds, his broken body moving with that horrible jerky determination. The neighborhood was dark and quiet, most houses already asleep. Jason and Rebecca ran toward the intersection, their feet slapping against the wet pavement. Jason risked a glance backward and saw Marcus following, his shambling run somehow keeping pace despite his injuries. They needed help, needed shelter, needed something. Then Jason saw the glow of lights still on in the house at the corner. The Patterson place. David and Margaret Patterson, the retired couple who always stayed up late watching old movies. Jason redirected their path, practically dragging Rebecca up the Pattersons' driveway. He pounded on the front door with his fist, not caring about the noise, not caring about anything except getting inside before Marcus caught up. "David. Margaret. Please, it's Jason Miller from down the street. We need help. Please." Footsteps approached from inside, and Jason heard David's gruff voice. Hold on, I'm coming." The porch light flickered on just as Jason heard the wet, dragging footsteps of Marcus entering the driveway behind them. The door opened, revealing David Patterson in his bathrobe, his expression confused and irritated. Then he saw Marcus's approaching form illuminated in the porch light, and his face went white with shock. David Patterson didn't need an explanation. He grabbed Jason's shoulder and yanked him and Rebecca inside, slamming the door shut just as Marcus reached the porch steps. The heavy oak door shuddered under the impact of Marcus's body hitting it a second later, followed by the scraping sound of fingernails clawing at the wood. "What in God's name is that thing?" David demanded, stumbling backward. His wife Margaret appeared from the living room, her gray hair in curlers, her hand clutching a cordless phone. "David, what's happening? Should I call the police?" Jason bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for breath while Rebecca leaned against the wall, cradling her injured ankle. "That's Marcus Thompson," Jason managed between breaths. "My friend who disappeared 3 years ago. He came back, but he's not human anymore. He's infected with something. He tried to attack us." Margaret's eyes widened with recognition. "Marcus? The sweet boy who helped us clean our gutters that one summer?" The door shuddered again under another impact, harder this time, and they all heard the wood beginning to splinter. David moved quickly for a man in his 70s, grabbing a wooden chair and wedging it under the doorknob. "That's not going to hold long," he said grimly. "Margaret, call 911 right now. I don't care how crazy it sounds." As Margaret dialed, Jason moved to the window and peered through the curtains. What he saw made his blood run cold. Marcus wasn't alone anymore. Standing at the edge of the driveway were 2 more figures, both swaying in the rain with that same unnatural posture. A woman in a tattered nightgown, her throat torn open, and a man in what looked like a delivery uniform, his face partially eaten away. They were just standing there, watching the house with those same cloudy, dead eyes. "There are more of them," Jason said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus brought friends. Rebecca joined him at the window, and he heard her sharp intake of breath. "Oh God. Jason, how is this possible? How can this be happening in Millbrook Heights?" David pulled aside another curtain to look out the side window and cursed under his breath. "There's another one in the backyard. Looks like a teenage kid. He's just standing by the fence." Margaret's voice rose from where she stood with the phone. "They're saying all emergency lines are overwhelmed. There's been multiple reports of attacks all over town tonight. They're telling people to shelter in place and secure their homes." "What does that mean? What's happening?" The pieces clicked together in Jason's mind with terrible clarity. "The cave," he said, turning to face the others. Marcus said he was in a cave with others like him. He's been trying to control the hunger for 3 years, but he finally gave in. And if he came back here, maybe the others did too. Maybe they all decided to come home, back to their old towns, their old lives. Another impact on the front door sent cracked spiderwebbing through the wood. David moved to a closet and pulled out a hunting rifle, checking to make sure it was loaded. "I don't know what's happening out there, but nothing's getting to my Margaret. You two stay away from the windows." He took up a position facing the front door, the rifle steady in his experienced hands. The scratching at the door suddenly stopped, and the silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. Jason strained to hear what was happening outside, but there was only the rain and the sound of his own racing heartbeat. Then Margaret gasped from the kitchen. "The back door. Something's trying the back door." Jason grabbed a fire poker from beside the Pattersons' fireplace and ran toward the kitchen with David right behind him. Through the window in the back door, he could see the teenage zombie David had mentioned, its small hands working at the doorknob with surprising dexterity. The lock was engaged, but as they watched, the creature's fingers found the spare key that the Pattersons kept on the ledge above the door frame. "They're learning," Rebecca said from behind them, her voice filled with horror. "They're remembering things. How to use keys, how to open doors." The teenage zombie inserted the key into the lock with jerky, mechanical movements. David raised his rifle, his hands shaking slightly. "I can't shoot a kid," he said. "Even if it's already dead, I can't." Jason stepped forward, pushing David's rifle barrel down. "Then don't. But we need to secure that door right now." He moved to grab the key through the window, but he was too late. The lock clicked open, and the door began to swing inward. The teenage zombie stumbled into the kitchen, its mouth opening in a wet hiss, revealing broken teeth stained with dried blood. Behind it, visible through the open doorway, more figures were emerging from the darkness between houses. Not just 3 or 4, but dozens of them, shambling through the rain-soaked neighborhood, drawn by some instinct toward the living. Millbrook Heights was being overrun, and the Patterson house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a trap. Jason swung the fire poker with both hands, catching the teenage zombie across the temple. The creature staggered sideways, crashing into Margaret's china cabinet, sending plates shattering to the floor. But it didn't fall, didn't stop. It simply reoriented itself and lunged again, its small hands reaching for Jason with fingers bent into claws. David finally pulled the trigger, the rifle shot deafening in the confined kitchen. The bullet caught the zombie in the chest, punching a hole clean through, but the creature barely noticed. "The head!" Rebecca shouted from the doorway. "You have to destroy the brain. That's the only way." David adjusted his aim and fired again. This time the teenage zombie dropped like a puppet with cut strings, the back of its skull blown apart, whatever dark force animating it finally extinguished. The gunshot seemed to trigger a response from the horde outside. Suddenly the entire house was under assault. Fists pounded on every door, hands scrabbled at every window. The sounds of breaking glass came from the living room, followed by Margaret's scream. Jason ran back to find 3 zombies climbing through the shattered front window, their bodies tearing on the remaining glass shards without any sign of pain or hesitation. David was right behind him, working the bolt on his rifle, but Jason knew they didn't have enough ammunition for this many. Margaret stood frozen in terror as one of the zombies, the woman in the tattered nightgown, reached for her with gore-stained hands. Rebecca grabbed a heavy bookend from the shelf and brought it down on the zombie's head with a sickening crunch. The creature collapsed, but 2 more were already climbing through behind it. "The garage!" David shouted, firing another shot that took down the zombie in the delivery uniform. "We have to get to my truck. It's our only chance." They ran through the chaos of the house, Jason pulling Margaret along while Rebecca and David covered their retreat. The sounds of the house being invaded echoed around them, the moans of the undead mixing with breaking furniture and shattering glass. They burst into the garage where David's old pickup truck sat, and for a moment Jason felt a surge of hope. Then he saw the garage door and his heart sank. It was electric, and opening it would take precious seconds they might not have. Seconds during which the horde could swarm them. David was already behind the wheel, turning the key, the engine roaring to life. Everyone in. Now. Jason helped Margaret into the passenger seat while he and Rebecca jumped into the truck bed. Through the door connecting the garage to the house, Jason could see zombies pouring into the kitchen, their bodies silhouetted against the interior lights. At least a dozen of them, maybe more. David hit the garage door opener and the door began its agonizingly slow rise with a mechanical groan. The zombies heard it and redirected, shambling toward the garage with renewed purpose. Come on, David muttered, revving the engine. The door was halfway up when the first zombie ducked under it, the woman in the nightgown that Rebecca had knocked down earlier. Half her skull was caved in, but she was still moving, still hungry. David didn't wait for the door to fully open. He threw the truck into reverse and stomped on the accelerator. The truck shot backward, clipping the garage door and tearing it from its tracks with a shriek of metal. Jason and Rebecca were thrown against the cab as the truck burst into the driveway, running over two zombies that didn't move fast enough to avoid the vehicle. David spun the wheel, the truck fishtailing on the wet pavement, then shifted into drive and accelerated down the street. Jason looked back at the Patterson house and saw it was completely overrun, zombies crawling through every opening like ants swarming a carcass. The entire neighborhood was chaos. Porch lights were on in multiple houses, and he could see people fighting for their lives through windows, could hear screams cutting through the rain. Millbrook Heights was dying. Then Jason saw him. Marcus, standing in the middle of the street ahead of them, his broken body illuminated in the truck's headlights. But something was different. His eyes weren't white anymore. They were brown again, clouded but aware, and there were tears streaming down his decayed face. David swerved to avoid him, but Marcus raised one hand, not in attack but in a gesture that clearly meant stop. Don't stop. Rebecca screamed, but David was already hitting the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt, and Marcus stumbled to the driver's side window. When he spoke, his voice was strained but human, lucid in a way it hadn't been since he first arrived. The school, Marcus gasped out. Go to Millbrook High School. The science teacher, Elizabeth Hartley. She knows. She's been researching. There's a cure, Jason. A cure. Then his eyes rolled back to white again, the moment of clarity gone, and he lunged at the window with a savage snarl. David gunned the engine, leaving Marcus grasping at empty air as they sped away into the nightmare that their town had become. The drive to Millbrook High School was a journey through hell. David navigated the truck through streets clogged with abandoned cars and wandering undead, each block revealing fresh horrors. Houses burned unchecked, their flames reflected in the rain-slicked pavement. Families huddled on rooftops while zombies clawed at the walls below. The emergency broadcast system crackled over the truck's radio, announcing that the National Guard was being mobilized, that people should remain indoors, that help was coming. But Jason knew that for many, help would arrive too late. Rebecca's hand found his in the truck bed, squeezing tight as they held on through David's evasive maneuvers. Neither of them spoke. There were no words adequate for what they were witnessing. Millbrook High School loomed ahead, its brick facade dark except for lights blazing in the science wing on the second floor. The parking lot was relatively clear of zombies, though several wandered near the football field. David drove the truck right up to the main entrance, mounting the curb and stopping at the front doors. They scrambled out, Jason helping Margaret who was shaking so badly she could barely walk. The front doors were locked, but through the glass they could see movement inside. Jason pounded on the door, shouting. Elizabeth Hartley. We need Elizabeth Hartley. Marcus Thompson sent us. For a long moment nothing happened. Then a woman appeared, perhaps 40 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail and intelligent gray eyes that assessed them quickly. She was carrying a crowbar, and she didn't lower it as she unlocked the door. "Get inside. Quickly." They rushed into the hallway, and Elizabeth locked the door behind them, sliding a metal bar across it for extra security. "You mentioned Marcus Thompson," she said, studying Jason intently. "Is he alive?" Jason shook his head. "He came to my house tonight. He was infected, turned into one of those things. But for a moment he was himself again. He told us you knew about a cure." Elizabeth's expression hardened with grief and determination. "Marcus was my student, years ago. Brilliant mind. When I heard he'd gone missing, I feared the worst." She gestured for them to follow her down the hallway. "Come to my lab. We don't have much time. They'll break through eventually." They climbed the stairs to the science wing where Elizabeth had converted her classroom into a makeshift research facility. Charts covered the walls, microscope slides littered the tables, and a small refrigerator hummed in the corner. 6 months ago, hikers started disappearing in the Appalachians, Elizabeth explained, pulling out a vial of clear liquid from the refrigerator. Bodies were found, partially eaten, reanimated. I started investigating, collecting samples. The infection is a parasitic organism that dies when exposed to extreme cold combined with a specific compound derived from wintergreen plants. This serum can kill the parasite. Jason felt hope surge in his chest. "So you can cure them? You can save Marcus?" Elizabeth's expression turned sorrowful. "No. The serum kills the parasite, but the host is already dead. Their bodies are just vessels. What it can do is prevent infection in the living. If someone is bitten, this serum administered within 4 hours can stop them from turning. It's not a cure. It's a vaccine." The hope in Jason's chest turned to ashes. Rebecca spoke up, her voice hoarse. "How many doses do you have?" Elizabeth looked at the refrigerator. 43. "I've been working alone, trying to synthesize more, but the process is complex. I was planning to present my findings to the CDC tomorrow, but..." She gestured toward the windows where the moans of the undead drifted up from outside. Tomorrow came too soon. A tremendous crash from downstairs made them all freeze. The zombies had breached the front entrance. They could hear the shuffling footsteps, the wet moans, dozens of them flooding into the school. Elizabeth grabbed a case and began loading vials into it with steady hands. "These need to reach the authorities. If they can mass-produce the serum, we can at least save those who haven't been bitten yet. We can stop this from spreading further." David checked his rifle. "I've got 6 rounds left. That won't stop what's coming." Jason moved to the window and looked out over the parking lot. His heart clenched when he saw Marcus standing there, looking up at the building. Even from this distance, Jason could see those eyes were brown again, lucid again, and Marcus was holding something. A can of gasoline from the maintenance shed. Jason understood immediately what his friend intended to do. Marcus was going to burn with the horde, take down as many as he could, and buy them time to escape. "There's a fire escape on the east side," Elizabeth said, following Jason's gaze. "We can make it to the athletic field and cross to the main road." Jason pressed his palm against the window glass, a final goodbye to the friend who had saved them twice now, once with information and once with sacrifice. Below, Marcus tilted his head in acknowledgement, then disappeared into the school. Within moments, orange flames began to lick at the first-floor windows. They ran. The end.